Reiffarth, Remax Real Estate Center. But like I say every time, you're following me, you know who I am. But I'd like to introduce to you Arielle Cecala with Crowley and Cummings. And today we're going to talk about the attorney's role, the different attorneys in a real estate transaction, because everyone kind of gets confused. And should I have an attorney? Should I not have an attorney? Oh my God, I'm already paying for an attorney, but they're representing the bank. So we're going to hopefully clarify the roles of the attorney in a transaction. So welcome. I'm so thrilled that we're finally doing this.
Thanks, Deb. I'm so happy to be here today.
So Arielle, you do a lot of real estate transactions.
Absolutely.
So, typically there's the bank's attorney.
Mm-hmm.
Buyers usually have an attorney involved to review the purchase and sale, and then sometimes sellers have an attorney and not have an attorney. So, let's address the buyer attorney and the closing attorney, because oftentimes they're one and the same, and buyers get so confused, like, wait a minute, they're representing the bank, how can they represent me? So let's try to clarify that.
Absolutely. So it is confusing. And here in Massachusetts, it's different than a lot of other states where there are certain states where there might not be an attorney involved on either side of the transaction. Right. But Massachusetts really isn't like that. Most transactions have an attorney who represents the seller and a separate attorney who represents the buyer, and maybe even the buyer's lender being a different attorney. Okay. Now, in a case where the buyer has a lender that they're working with and an attorney that they're working with that has a relationship with that lender, they're able to represent the buyer and the lender simultaneously. Mm-hmm. That is confusing for people because it sounds like a conflict of interest.
Right.
How could one lawyer work for both the bank and the buyer?
Right.
And the reason why that's actually okay is because the buyer and the lender have a base level of needs that are the same.
Right.
So the lender's need from the attorney is for the attorney to provide clear title, mm-hmm. Maybe marking out the lot lines of the property, mm-hmm. and confirming that all the taxes and liens are up to date on the property. Okay. So the buyer also has those same needs. Those are the buyer's basic needs. So in a case, in my situation where, let's take Radius as a great example. Mm-hmm. We have a great relationship with Radius. So if I have a buyer who's working with Radius, I have a relationship with Radius, I can provide those basic needs for Radius and for my buyer, mm-hmm. but then I can go above and beyond for my buyer, mm-hmm. and provide them extra representation that goes above and beyond those basic needs, and that is negotiating the purchase and sale agreement.
Right, and that, and that's, I always, why do I need an attorney to do that? I explained to them, it's a legal contract. Yes, we wrote the offer, and working with great attorneys like you, I'm really good at writing that offer. So hopefully Absolutely. We're not negotiating a lot of detail in the purchase and sale. But like I tell them, there's a big difference between the minutia of the contract.
Absolutely.
Seller may or seller will. That's that simple
the
word, will
and
may.
Details.
It's a contract, it's legal binding. So what are some things that you're negotiating other than will and may?
Absolutely. So typically the seller is going to provide a standard, they'll provide the first rendition of the purchase and sale agreement. It'll be a standard document, and then what we'll do is we'll add on a rider that might be like 7 or 8 pages long that really fleshes out and expands on extra protections for the buyer and goes into certain scenarios that can happen and how we're going to protect the buyer in that situation. Right. And that's where the buyer's really getting this elevated level of representation because they have somebody who's really going through and going through all the details and negotiating with the seller's attorney, so the buyer has that protection, and they have somebody who's looking over their mortgage contingency date.
Right, and that's in a lot of, I know when I'm working with buyers, I have it in my calendar, I set Google reminders, but it's just another set of eyes. So real quick, and then we'll finish up this episode. Give an example of what one of those, that extra level in the rider that a buyer may get, like something, because there's a reason why it's in the rider, because there's a horror story to go behind it. So
absolutely.
Just one quick example.
Sure. So a very common one is if the buyer needs, if the seller is gonna request an extension, and if that's gonna actually cause the buyer's rate lock to expire, we wanna make sure that the seller, we're gonna require the seller to pay for that rate lock extension, or give the buyer the opportunity to cancel the agreement.
Yeah.
And so that's a really added level of protection for the buyer.
Right, and that's not something I would get involved with as an agent because not my job.
Absolutely.
Great information. Hopefully we clarified that bank buyer representation a little bit better for our clients out there. If you want to get hold of Arielle, her contact information is going to be at the very end of the video. Feel free to reach out. She's very accessible. I know that personally because I harass her with emails and text messages all the time, especially when we're doing a deal together. But feel free, and sometimes, if you have legal questions and you want a second opinion, she's a good person to go to for a second opinion too, if you're not sure you're getting the right answer. So
absolutely,
we'll see. We're going to do a couple of more episodes, so you'll see her again. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks for tuning in.